people are trying to figure out what is causing this rising epidemic of heart disease. And there was a lot of evidence that implicated. We've been trying to battle against this epidemic of heart disease, and we really are losing that battle.
Do you feel that the American Heart Association has been compromised and is not necessarily distributing the right information or to actually solve this epidemic?
That is very true.
If you stop smoking early enough, your lungs will absolutely bounce back. I mean, they'll pretty much go to 100% recovery, and they almost look at the body like a machine.
We literally temporarily replace the function of the heart with a machine.
Wow.
The medical system is really geared towards taking care of sick people.
They want you to be sick. That's how they make money, is by making sure you have to keep coming back to them.
I don't think it's one thing, but...
Are you looking for actionable insights from the world's most inspiring individuals? The Built by Love podcast is on a mission to transform your life, your business, and your health. Tune in for impactful conversations with people who do business differently. Avoid burnout, acquire freedom, and live life fully on your own terms. With me, Pete Daly-Dickson, alongside Daniel Bussius.
Dr. Philip Ovadia, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Built by Love podcast. One of the things we like to do with the podcast is we like to start with a pivotal moment in your time, whether it was personally or professionally, that changed your life, whether it was something that happened while you're in the operating table or something that happened to you personally that really started to transform who you are today and how you practice medicine. Can you share a story with us?
Yeah, sure thing. That professional pivotal moment really came when I had a unfortunate young mother in her late 30s show up with a devastating cardiac condition, a condition we call an aortic dissection. This is a tear of the blood vessel leading out from the heart, and that condition unfortunately carries a very high fatality rate with it. And my team and I spent 12 hours in the operating room trying to save her life. But unfortunately, we couldn't. The damage was just devastating, and we could not save her. And as a heart surgeon, this is something I unfortunately have to deal with. But what was different this time is I realized that the problem wasn't that me and my surgical team couldn't save her. The real problem was that she ever ended up on my operating room table to start with. And I thought about all the missed opportunities. And at that point, what I had learned about how this problem could have and should have been prevented. And that's really what set me down this path of working to keep people off my operating table and helping them to understand how heart disease is largely preventable.
That's incredible. I can only imagine, and I know we'll unpack a little bit more in this podcast of what that must be like to go to work and save lives, and then also have other outcomes as well, right? Most at the time of this recording, at least what's going on in social media, is there seems to be this trend or this slant of doctors are working in cahoots with pharmaceutical companies. They want you to be sick. And that's how they make money, is by making sure you have to keep coming back to them. And what you're saying is quite the opposite. And we can talk about that again for the industry and other people, but specific to you, that's incredible. So you're saying, I don't want to see you. Let's figure out a way to prevent you ever having to show up. Was it something that was building, and that was the crux of that moment of that young mother on that operating table? Or can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure thing. The background was really my personal journey, because I spent a long time as a very unhealthy heart surgeon. I was morbidly obese. I was pre-diabetic. And I had this realization that I was going to end up on my own operating table, so to speak.
Wow.
And I also understood that I didn't really know what to do about it, because the advice that I had been educated to give my patients, and it's advice that many of us have heard, right? Eat less, move more, follow the, food pyramid. That wasn't working for me, and it wasn't working for the patients that were ending up on my operating table. So, I first had to undergo my own personal transformation, and I ultimately lost around 100 pounds, was able to
Wow.
maintain it, reversed my prediabetes. And along the way, I realized, that the medical system is really geared towards taking care of sick people. It's not
Mhm.
really positioned to keep people from getting sick, or really to reverse their diseases, which is something that I admit I didn't really recognize as a possibility until I underwent this personal transformation and then came to understand how it could help my patients. And that young woman uh, followed that episode, but that really is when it came to a head for me. That I said, I can't just keep doing what I've been doing. And yes, heart surgery is miraculous, and I feel blessed, every day that I can offer that to people who need it. But I also recognize that no matter how good a surgeon I might be, no matter how good, all the surgeons out there might be, you're never as good after you have the surgery as you would have been if you didn't need the surgery in the first place. And that's why I have shifted my focus largely towards keeping people off the operating table and trying to get to them before they reach that point that they need this major intervention.
That's profound. Wow. One of the things you said that was really interesting was that reversing of diseases. So I know I'm generalizing here. There's a lot of different diseases and different situations for individuals, but there's autoimmune disease. There's pre-diabetes, and so for the most part, are these reversible by diet, exercise, other things, or?
Yeah, so the vast majority of the chronic diseases that we face, and you listed many of them, right? We have the metabolic diseases like diabetes, like heart disease, like many forms of cancer, and we have things like autoimmune disease that we now, um, at least some physicians, I guess I'll say, now recognize that these are oftentimes reversible, and that we can prevent what was thought to be an inevitable progression of these diseases. Diabetes is a great example. Type 2 diabetes, which is the most common form of it, is reversible. And we now routinely see people, I see it in my practice, many of the physicians that practice the same way as me see it as well, that we routinely can get people off of the medications and get them back to a normal state of health, that they are no longer diabetic. And again, admittedly, that's not something I knew was possible before I went, down this pathway and had this journey.
So many questions, but I guess before we get there, because I could go on for hours with you. I guess we should take a step back. And when you went to med school, so first and foremost, what intrigued you to go to med school? I've had many friends that are doctors, so just from the outside perspective of them telling me the amount of school, the amount of residency you have to do, and then if you want to get into a specialty like a radiologist or a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon, you're stacking on many more years and as well as debt to pay for that. So most will just go into like the generalization of a medical doctor. They won't go into a specialty like you. So that's a huge commitment. What inspired you, A, to be a doctor, and then B, to go that extra mile? You're in the elite spectrum of doctors out there in the world.
Yeah, the desire to become a physician was something that was truly innate. I have to say, when you ask my parents, they will say that from a very young age, when anyone asked what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, I always said I wanted to be a doctor. And actually, they claim that I specified that I wanted to be a surgeon. And
Wow.
what's interesting about that is I didn't grow up in a family of doctors. I wasn't around doctors. The only real exposure to doctors besides, kind of routine, medical visits when you're a kid. My older brother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was about 5 years old. He was about 8. So I don't know if that somehow influenced me. But as I went through, that pathway that you talked about, and you're right, it's not an easy path to become a doctor. Um, all my exposure to the medical field, volunteering in hospitals and things like that, I just loved it. It was truly a passion for me. And the pathway to become a surgeon, like you said, is not an easy one. The pathway to become a heart surgeon is even more difficult and long, but it was something that I always enjoyed. The heart surgery in particular really grabbed my attention early on. After I finished medical school and was starting to go through my training, that area, just the physiology of the heart, the kind of technical challenge of operating on the heart, it's really what grabbed my attention, my passion. And 5 years later now, I'm still passionate about it. I still very much uh, enjoy doing heart surgery, feel blessed to be able to do that. But like you said, it's certainly not the easy path. And it really, I make a good living as a heart surgeon, but it's not about that. The money that you get paid could never really sustain you through the difficult challenges of being a heart surgeon if you're not passionate about it.
There's a unique perspective where you love what you do. You have a passion for helping people. Obviously, from outside of the surgery room, right? You're out there. You're writing books. You're helping people to improve their lives so they don't end up on your operating table. And ultimately, what your specialty is the heart, which is the lifeblood of the body, right? It's the meaning of, when you talk about your heart, you talk about where you have your family, your love, and it's an interesting perspective that you really live what you believe, and you also work on that with with the residency and with going through medical school. There's a lot of talk of crazy hours, long hours. Is that true? What's it really like, if you could paint us a picture for the common folk that aren't physicians out there in the world?
Yeah, so it certainly was true when I was doing it. There have been some changes that maybe it's a little bit less true these days, but it's certainly by no means easy training to be a heart surgeon. But, I went through it in an era before there were some of the work hour restrictions that have now been put into place. And yes, I had, many long days and many long weeks. I had weeks where I would spend, single digit number of hours outside of the hospital. It is definitely a both physically and mentally arduous training. And, I look back and say, well, thankfully I was, young then. Although I would also say that because of these improvements I've had in my health, I do feel like I could go back and do it again in the health that I am now. As opposed to when I did go through it, I was young, but I was very unhealthy. And I think back as to what, sort of effects that may have had. But I don't recommend it. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. And like I said, if your goal is to, sort of, if you're focused on the making money part of it, there are a lot easier ways to do it than going into heart surgery.
You didn't start your business to be a full-time marketer. You started it to take control of your future and live life on your own terms, to earn abundantly, and to make a positive impact in this world. But somewhere along the way, funnels, lead magnets, landing pages, and email sequences became your second job. At Built by Love Agency, we get it, and we've got you. We specialize in done-for-you marketing that speaks your brand, sells your services, and brings in your dream clients without you lifting a finger. Whether you're ready to scale or just tired of duct taping your marketing together, it's time to hand it over to the pros. We've been in business since 1998 and have worked with over 1,000 brands, ranging from Fortune 500 companies to small businesses with visions to change the world. Our experience in what we do runs deep, and our multiple awards, accolades, and decades of happy clients shows what we do for our clients works. Visit BuiltByLove.com today to schedule your discovery call so you can get back to doing the work you love. An agency you'll love, results you'll love even more. BuiltByLove.com.
Other doctors I've spoken to have a unique outlook, I guess you could say, or perspective of the human body. It's almost like a machine. I've had conversations with doctors, and I'm not saying this is like right or wrong, where they're like, well, yeah, if you stop smoking early enough, your lungs will absolutely bounce back. I mean, they'll pretty much go to 100% recovery, and they almost look at the body like a machine, right? Rather than someone like me, it's my body, and I want to take care of it. They look at it a little bit from a different perspective. Maybe removing the emotion and the human out of it, and really looking at it as this mechanism. Did you gain that, or do you have that? And did that come from residency, or what's that like for you?
Yeah, heart surgery in particular is very interesting from this standpoint because oftentimes when we're doing heart surgery, we literally temporarily replace the function of the heart with a machine. We use something called the heart lung bypass machine to take over the function of the heart so that we can stop it and do the work we need to on it. So, in a lot of ways, as a surgeon, you are sort of trained to a little bit disconnect, right? The part of the body you're working on from the human, that it's within. I try never to let that get too excessive, I guess I would say. I always do try and remember and stay connected to the fact that this is a living, breathing human being that I'm operating on. This is a mother or a father or a sister or a brother or a son or a daughter, however you want to think about it. And that one of the problems I see in medicine these days is that we over compartmentalize things. So you have the specialist that's only looking at the heart, and you have the other specialist that might be, looking at the brain or whatever it is. And a lot of times the answers lie in the holistic approach. And again, this is something very different, that has evolved in me over this journey that I've been on over the past decade or so versus how I came out of medical school and how I practiced in my early career. Because one of the things that I see that oftentimes maybe leads us astray a little bit in medicine is if you're only thinking about what might be better for the heart, you might inadvertently been doing harm to other parts of the body. And more so what I've discovered, and this is really germane to what I talk about now, metabolic health. Metabolic health is so powerful because it really touches everything in the body. And we look at, what would seem to be different chronic diseases that people ultimately end up dying from. Heart disease being number one, cancer being number two. We have things like Alzheimer's, diabetes, chronic kidney disease on that list. And when you come to the realization that if you address there's a common root cause to these things. And if you address that common root cause, you can impact all of those areas. And that's so much more powerful than even just saying, well, I can fix heart disease, right? But I can't do anything about all that other stuff. And now I feel like I am a much more well rounded physician because the things that I recommend actually impact every system in the body.
This is going to be a bold question. You hear about the metabolic, and you hear about the rate of cancer, the rate of autism, like all of these different things, and you start to look at the timeline of history. And I won't get into specifics because I don't recall the numbers exactly, but it was something like in the 50s, it was like one in 100,000 or a million or something for autism, and now it's like 1 in 30 or something. Again, don't hold me to those numbers, but it's something dramatic. Same thing with cancer, the rate of cancer, the rate of metabolic health, autoimmune diseases. Is this coming from our food, the chemicals? I mean, do you know what that root cause is? I mean, obviously people are sitting, they're not out exercising as much, but what are the key things that you've been able to identify from your medical or physician lens of what's happening to us?
Yeah, and I don't think it's one thing, but I think the food that we eat is a large part of this. And we certainly see the shifts lining up with the changes in how we ate. They align very well. Now, again, I think it's many things that have changed, right? We can point to the food that we eat. We can point to some other toxins, we'll say, that have been introduced into our environment. And these can be things we get from food, things that are in the air, perhaps some of the therapeutics that we have introduced may be contributing to these effects as well. But I always start with food really seems to be a big part of it. And as we shifted towards away from eating whole, real food, foods that were grown and the animals that ate that food that was grown, to this overly processed food environment where things are now coming in boxes and bags and they have ingredients and chemicals in them that were never part of our food environment going back historically. That's when we really saw this chronic disease epidemic take off. Heart disease, again, is the example that I focus on most. And when you go back to the early 20th century, right, the early 1900s, heart disease is basically undescribed. We have kind of the leading physicians of the late 1800s, early 1900s that would kind of publish their life work, what they saw. And you see heart disease being incredibly rare. And it starts to creep up, starting around World War I, the early 1900s. By 1950, heart disease had become the number one killer in the United States. It really reached a crisis point, 1955, when President Eisenhower has a heart attack while in office, and the war on heart disease was declared. And we can maybe talk about some of that, but we've been trying to battle against this epidemic of heart disease now for coming up on 70 plus years, and we really are losing that battle. Heart disease continues to be the number one killer, and it is getting worse. So that is, at a high level, something else that led me to really start to question my training, because I kind of took a step back and said, well, if we understand what's causing heart disease, why haven't we been able to fix it? And
Right.
the sort of dogma that I had been taught about what was causing heart disease, to me, it became obvious that that couldn't be the real root cause, because if it was, we'd be seeing heart disease getting better. And instead, we're seeing it getting worse.
Do you feel that, I don't know if this is a dangerous question for you. Do you feel that the American Heart Association has been compromised, and is not necessarily distributing the right information or helpful information to actually solve this epidemic.
Yes, I think that is very true. The American Heart Association has a lot of its funding that comes from the food and the pharmaceutical industry. And these are two industries that aren't necessarily focused on truly making people healthier, right? You know, if you're the pharmaceutical industry, your primary purpose, right, and this goes for any business, right? You're trying to improve, you know, you're trying to serve your stakeholders, your shareholders,
Mhm.
and you're trying to drive more business. And sick people need pharmaceuticals. So, in a lot of ways, the pharmaceutical industry is not incentivized to keep people healthy, at least we'll say. I wouldn't go as far to say they're looking to intentionally make people sick, but they're profiting off of people's illnesses. So, they're not necessarily incentivized to keep them from getting sick. And the food industry is looking to sell more food, right? Which comes down to making people more hungry. And a lot of these processed foods are sort of engineered to do that. And unfortunately, that processing we are now discovering is leading to a lot of these chronic health conditions. And again, that's not necessarily a concern or a focus for the food industry, intentionally or unintentionally. They're sort of, you know, tied with the pharmaceutical industry. But we see an organization like the American Heart Association that really, from its earliest foundings, or at least it underwent this transformation that made it a prominent organization again around this time of the 1950s, that a lot of the money that allowed that to happen was coming from the food industry at first and then the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that now clouds their ability to objectively say what we could truly be doing to improve heart disease.
I just read yesterday, it was interesting, that there was a paper that came out saying RJ Reynolds, right, which is an American tobacco company, has figured out a way to inject the mRNA vaccine into produce. And I was thinking, what's a tobacco company doing with a vaccine and then figuring out how to get it into our food system? That doesn't make sense. It's kind of shores up what you're saying is, hey, these companies are all in cahoots. They're all in together, working again to maximize shareholder profits, right? And for those that don't know that are listening, RJ Reynolds is one of the largest owners of packaged foods. Nabisco, a multitude of other brands all sit behind RJ Reynolds, which when they shifted after the master settlement agreement of you can't smoke in bars, you can't do this, they took all those scientists that were figuring out how to manufacture cigarettes and move them over to food. And that drives absolutely how does the crunch of the chip make you want another chip that you eat the whole bag? How does it the taste flavor explode on the first bite that you want to have another one and another one? It's manufactured for you to overeat because the more you eat, the more they can sell.
Yeah, very true. And many people don't realize that the history it goes back even further. And what we really see is the sugar industry. Again, you know, 1950s, 1960s, people are trying to figure out what is causing this rising epidemic of heart disease. And there was a lot of evidence that implicated sugar. And what the sugar industry did was they got marketers involved. They
Mm-hmm.
paid scientists to implicate dietary fat. Cholesterol was made the enemy. And they were successful in doing that. And, you know, as everyone now realizes, right, we went down this pathway where the prevailing theory became that it was dietary fat, dietary cholesterol that was driving the epidemic of heart disease. And that led us to change our food supply in many ways. We went to all these low-fat foods, overly processed low-fat foods. It led us to
You've built the business, you've made the money, but deep down, you know that's not why you're here. You're here to rise, to embody elite health, to deepen the love you give and receive, to lead with purpose, to leave a legacy that outlives you. Rise Tribe is where affluent entrepreneurs like you align wealth with wisdom, hustle with harmony, power with purpose. This is not another mastermind. It's a movement, an inner circle of elite, high-performing leaders who demand more from life, from love, from themselves. Curated, private, invite only. Live virtual workshops on health, wealth, and expansion. Conversations that awaken your soul. Connections that elevate you. But here's the truth. Not everyone gets in. And for a limited time, membership is complimentary.
pharmaceutical approaches to lower the blood cholesterol levels. And that has been the prevailing dogma around heart disease for the past, 40 plus years now that we're dealing with this. And again, during that time, heart disease has not gotten better. And what was interesting is when the tobacco industry started getting attacked for, their negative health outcomes, they grabbed a lot of those same marketers, a lot of those same techniques of, paying scientists to try and do studies that would distract or disprove this. And they relied, they pulled them all from the sugar industry, is where they learned
Wow.
all of these techniques and borrowed a lot of the same people that were able to accomplish that for the sugar industry. So that they are deeply intertwined. And like you mentioned now, many of the tobacco industries, when that line of business became not as profitable, they turned to buying up food companies because sugar really, became the next, I would say, most profitable addiction once tobacco was no longer profitable.
And I guess this is where it all started of eggs are bad for you, and everything else. What was it? Don't eat butter. Butter is bad for you. And then it was
Yep.
margarine and all the other things that started coming through. I remember there was the spray as well, right? Don't use that. Just spray this on your bread. It's 0 calories, which is kind of crazy. How can something be 0 calories and be good for you, right? So if I can, what do you eat? Or what I should say is this, is what will you not eat? Let's start there. Like, what will you absolutely stay away from? You will not touch.
Yeah, so really, processed food is at the top of that list. And listen, I'm not going to say I'm perfect, right? None of us are. But yeah, my number one rule, I guess, my goal when it comes to food is to eat real food first and foremost. Now, I think what will be most surprising to people in the audience to hear a heart surgeon say is the thing that I eat the most of is red meat. I am on a very animal protein heavy diet. And the reason I do so is because red meat is the most nutrient dense food that we as humans can eat. It is the food that we literally evolved eating. It is probably what allowed us to evolve, is the ability to eat a lot of red meat and fat in particular. And so, here I am as a heart surgeon saying, basically, you need to do the exact opposite of what they've been telling you to do. You shouldn't be eating a low fat diet. You shouldn't be avoiding red meat. You should be eating a diet that is based in whole, real foods, lower in sugar and carbohydrates, eliminate the processed food, and eat your meat eat your veggies, and that is what is going to get you to optimal health. And like I said earlier, it's not only about your heart health, it's about your overall health. This impacts so much more than the heart. But specifically when it comes to heart disease, what we've been told about red meat, dietary cholesterol, dietary saturated fat is not true. So you do want to eat the butter, you do want to eat the meat. Those eggs are great for you, and stay away from the processed food, the highly processed carbohydrates, the breads, the pastas, certainly the cakes and the cookies. And that's what's going to lead you to best health.
What's your go-to in regards to red meat? Are you eating steak? Are you eating the organ meats? A combination of both? Is there something that you prefer that's as nutrient dense as possible?
Yeah, so really all of the above. Steak is probably the most common thing I do. Organ meats are a small part. I don't think they're essential, but they are sort of
Okay.
nature's multivitamin. They are kind of the most nutrient dense. And so if you enjoy them and you have a way of incorporating into your diet, I think they're great. But I know plenty of people who just eat steak and ground beef and, other meats and do just fine with that. So I like a variety. I eat beef, I eat lamb, I eat a lot of seafood, pork, um, eggs are a big contributor to my diet as well. But anything that comes from the animal kingdom, people should not be fearing and really should be eating more of these days. We don't eat enough of this stuff. And that's what kind of leads us to eating more of the processed food.
Right. Um, I know you said to stay closest to the source, right? But um, what's your opinion of the vegan diet, right? I know, again, this is very a broad and difficult question, but there's a lot of people in one camp saying vegan is the way to go. Don't eat animal, eat all vegan. You're going to be healthier. There's even a Netflix documentary I actually watched about it, which was pretty convincing. A bunch of NFL players all sitting around, they're all eating vegan, and their performance is better than ever. And then you see on the other side people that are saying, I barely eat vegetables. I'll eat some, but I'm pretty much eating steak and eggs. I'm eating high protein. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I go into this in my book, Stay Off My Operating Table. And what I talk about, what I looked at, because I looked at that same kind of situation and said, first of all, what's the commonality here, right? And the
Mm,
commonality is they're eating whole, real food. They're a good vegan diet, and I really call it a plant-based diet, because what you want to do is eliminate the processed food. And unfortunately, you can do a vegan diet and still have a lot of processed food. And we actually have the studies that show us that ends up not benefiting the health. So it's really about that elimination of processed food. Now, the reason that I favor incorporating meat is because there are some unique nutrients in meat that you cannot get from plants. And the opposite is not true. You can get all of the nutrients that you need as a human being from animals because the animals have already eaten the plants. And the animals, in many ways, are better able to process and digest the plants. So that's why, there are some unique challenges if you're going to do this on a plant based diet, because there are some nutrients that you can't get from the plants that you're going to have to supplement, which makes it, again, you go back 100 years, vegans didn't exist because we didn't have the vitamins and the supplements that are necessary to stay healthy on a vegan diet. Protein is very challenging to get, just from plants. Complete proteins, at least as humans need them, are very challenging to get from plants. So those are some of the challenges of a vegan diet. But ultimately, what I say is, if the diet is improving your metabolic health, I'm all in favor of it. And what we really see in the science around vegan diets is that they're better than standard Western diets, right? The high
Okay.
carbohydrate, high fat, highly processed diet. The vegan diet is clearly better than that. That's what's been demonstrated. There has never been a study that I'm aware of directly comparing a vegan to a carnivore diet, for instance. I don't think there ever will be, but both can improve metabolic health. It's just, in the end, it's much more challenging to do a truly healthy vegan diet. And I prefer eating meat, so I'm going to eat meat.
Gotcha. Do you have a preference in regards to the amount of nutrients in the food that you're eating for like grass fed beef or pasture raised eggs versus just going to the grocery store and grabbing whatever is in the refrigerated section?
Yeah, so that difference is going to be relatively small. I always tell people whatever meat is affordable and available to you, that's the best one to eat. And even though what might be perceived as lower quality meat, the sort of factory farmed, mass
Mhm.
produced meat is going to be better than the processed food. Now, there are some other reasons to prefer more responsible farming techniques and ranching techniques. And certainly, if you can get it and if it works for your lifestyle, it's affordable. The grass fed, regeneratively raised is the ideal way to do this, and I try and do that whenever possible. But I would still much rather someone grab the factory raised grain finished beef than the packaged food that might be a few aisles over from it.
You've been pretty vocal about seed oils, and I want to talk about that in a moment, but I can't help but going back. If you'll allow me to shift in a direction for a moment, there's two selfish questions that I guess from my perspective of curiosity, I kind of would like to know if you're willing to share. And one is, what's it like to be operating on a human heart, right? I mean, you had mentioned earlier you worked on this one woman for 12 hours. So I mean, what's that like? Do you bring your team? Are they assigned to you? Are there things that only you and your team know about? Like, are there smells or sounds or just anything that you can shed your light, whether it's good or shocking or just interesting? Can you bring us into an operating room to tell us kind of what that's like? As well as how do you operate for 12 hours? Like, do you go take a break? Like, what's that like? If you can kind of just walk us into that room so we can be a witness to that.
Yeah, so heart surgery is definitely a unique area of surgery. And in most hospitals that do heart surgery, there's going to be a dedicated heart surgery team. So, obviously the doctor, the surgeon, right, specializes in heart surgery, but the nurses, the surgical assistants, the anesthesiology team, those are all oftentimes dedicated to doing heart surgery and only heart surgery. Um, and it is a unique environment. Now, most surgeries are nowhere near that long. And when we do end up with long surgeries like that, yeah, you oftentimes there can be opportunities to, maybe take a break. But, you're really, in a situation like that, right? I'm just laser focused on saving the life, of the person that's on the table. And yeah, sometimes you do things that maybe would seem a little superhuman, I guess, that I can stand there for 10, 12 hours and not go to the bathroom, or not have anything to eat. What's interesting is one of the positive effects of going on a making the dietary changes that I made and being on a animal heavy carnivore type diet is I routinely only eat once a day.
Wow.
And So if I have to go a long period of time without eating, it's actually less of a challenge than it used to be. I think back to the beginning of my career, and that was oftentimes a big concern to me. I knew I was going into a long operation, you know,
What if the real secret to explosive business growth wasn't found in tactics, trends, or tech, but in something far more primal? Something every human being craves: love. Real, genuine, emotional connection. You've tried the funnels, you've chased the hacks, you've burned money on ads that promised magic but delivered mediocrity. It's not your fault. You've been sold noise when what your marketing needs is music. This book changes everything. Rooted in behavioral science and built on the same relationship-based marketing formulas used by billion-dollar brands, this time-tested framework doesn't just teach you how to market, it transforms the way you see your customers. You'll learn how to turn cold traffic into loyal fans, how to spark love at first scroll, and how to build an unshakable bond that makes your brand unforgettable. Because in a world drowning in gimmicks, authenticity is your unfair advantage. This isn't theory. It's the engine behind some of the fastest growing businesses in the world. And it's helped smart entrepreneurs like you build tribes, not just audiences. Agencies use it, CMOs swear by it, buyers can't put it down. It's won multiple awards, and it's climbing the charts because real marketing that connects always wins. So stop chasing attention, start building love, and watch your business take off. Grab your copy now at Target.com, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble retail stores, or anywhere quality books are sold. Your future customers are waiting for love. It's time to give it to them. Get your copy of Marketing Built by Love today.
What am I going to eat before? What am I going to eat after? Will there be
Right.
opportunity to kind of duck out in the middle and get something to eat? And now my lifestyle just allows me to tolerate those things much better. And it doesn't bother me if I have to, be doing a long operation. Um, the like I said, the technical aspects of operating on the heart are almost unmatched in surgery, right? The preciseness that is necessary to have a successful operation. There aren't many other areas that are like this, and perhaps brain surgery is the other area that might be equivalent. And it is a very unique environment. It's interesting right now, having done this, multiple thousands of times in my life. It does become somewhat routine, but every operation is a little different. And, um, I oftentimes will draw the parallel of the pilot flying the plane, right? And
Mm.
you can be on sort of autopilot, literally in their case, but figuratively in my case, much of the time. But when those anomalies come up, if you're not really attentive and really, good at what you do, uh, that's when the disasters can occur. And so, again, I feel very fortunate and blessed every time I have that opportunity to help a patient in that way. But I also have this unique perspective now as I look at, the preventative stuff, of understanding the magnitude of what's involved in that. And perhaps that's what drives me even more to keep people off the operating table, because it's
Right.
clearly a better option if you can avoid that operation ultimately.
Has there ever been an experience in the operating room, dare I say, a miracle that you feel that a higher power, God, has been involved? Has that shaped you, if you have faith in any way?
There are certainly, I will say, things that happen, good and bad, right, that we don't understand. And you do kind of the same thing in the same way, and the outcomes become different, right? And there are things that I can think back of where I had kind of, given up, and I said this isn't going to end well. And for whatever reason, all of a sudden things kind of turn around, and you look at things like that and you start to understand that, we don't at least have the ability to appreciate all of the different factors that are going into the ultimate outcome of an operation like this, a big operation like we do on a routine basis. And even outside the operating room, sometimes there'll be patients before or after the surgery that you're managing. And, either they're very sick and seem to be heading down a bad pathway, and all of a sudden things turn around. Or, unfortunately, the opposite occurs as well, where someone seems to be doing great and all of a sudden, something devastating happens. And again, we can't fully understand all of the factors that are going into that one way or the other.
Gotcha. You've obviously seen thousands of hearts. You know what a sick heart looks like. You know what a healthy heart looks like. And you've been vocal about seed oils. Can you talk about the impact of seed oils on our body and the damage that it's doing to us?
Yeah, so seed oils, these oils that are derived from plants, and it's interesting, right? The common name for them is vegetable oil, and that was intentionally done to give this aura around them, like they're coming from vegetables, they must be healthy. But these are highly processed oils. They actually started as industrial lubricants, and again, the the history of how they got introduced into our food supply, it really does go back to manufacturers. The candle manufacturers were the first ones. And as candles were being phased out because the light bulb gets introduced, they had to find a way of repurposing these fats, these oils that they were using in the candle making process. And some of the scientists were able to figure out how to detoxify these things enough that they wouldn't be immediately poisonous to human beings. And
Wow.
they then got promoted, for different reasons. We look at one of the earliest examples, which was Crisco.
Mhm.
And Crisco got introduced to the kind of American consumer as a easier alternative, we could say. But health was an early part of that story. Without any real evidence, there were these early marketing claims that this was a more healthful way than the traditional, tallow and lard that was being used at that time.
Right.
And that's sort of the early part of that story. And heart disease quickly became a focus there. Um, as the introduction of these things into the food supply, right, early 1900s, is when we started to see heart disease and many other chronic diseases increase. The increase in obesity uh, tracks very well with the consumption of vegetable and seed oils and our shift towards using these oils increasingly. And yes, I admit we don't have the one study that proves that these things are causing these health problems, but we see very strong correlations. And we do have some scientific evidence, some of the rigorously done, what we call interventional trials, that suggest negative health outcomes from these things. Now, as I said more broadly, right, processed food is what I focus on. And there are two components of processed food that seem to have the most potential for causing harm. One is the vegetable and seed oils, and the other is the highly refined carbohydrates, sugar and other, highly refined carbohydrates. And ultimately, neither of these are necessary for humans to survive. And so that's what has led me to just recommend get rid of the processed food, avoid the vegetable and seed oils, avoid the highly refined carbohydrates. I'm not sure it's important for someone to really know, is it one or the other? Because ultimately, if you just eliminate the processed food, if you go back to eating whole, real food, that gets all of that out of your food environment. And we repeatedly see now that that leads to dramatic improvements in health.
Is there any connection to gut health and heart health, or is that a myth?
No, there's a strong connection there. And it's interesting, when there is a direct connection. There are nerves that literally run, basically straight from one to the other.
Wow.
But we see, again, a lot of these common factors around what we call metabolic health. And it's affected by the gut, it affects the heart, and then we can continue on up to the brain, actually, that there's this kind of gut heart brain axis that we can see. And many of the things that affect one part are going to end up affecting the other part.
As I know we're wrapping our time today, some people will do their annual physical and they'll have an opportunity to do some blood work. Other people that are super healthy will see a homeopathic doctor maybe and do blood panels every 3 months or 6 months. And I'm not saying that that's the question here of blood panels, but it seems to be an over or underlying thing is that's a indication of your body's health. I guess my question to you is this: is are there some simple markers that the listener can follow, whether that's getting a blood panel or something else that you would recommend that they do to see where am I sitting on this spectrum of I want to stay off Dr. Philip Ovadia's operating table?
Yep.
What would be those markers that you would be looking at?
Yeah, so I typically start with the 5 basic markers of metabolic health. 2 of these you can measure at home. One of them is your waist circumference. You just get that tape measure out. You measure just above the level of your belly button. Best to do this first thing in the morning. And if you're a man, your goal is for that to be less than 40 inches. If you're a woman, you want it to be less than 35 inches. The second metric of metabolic health is our blood pressure. And you want your blood pressure to be less than 130/85 without the use of medication. If you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, it's oftentimes one of the earliest indicators of a metabolic health problem, and unfortunately doesn't get recognized as such. And then 3 basic blood tests that most physicians are going to get, as part of sort of an annual panel. You want to look at your fasting blood glucose level. So the amount of sugar that's in your bloodstream when you haven't eaten for about 10 to 12 hours. You want that to be less than 100 milligrams per deciliters is the unit. Some people instead will look at what's called the hemoglobin A1C. This is sort of a look at your average blood sugar over a 3-month period. And if you have that metric, less than 5.7 is what you're aiming for. And then the cholesterol panel. Now, what's interesting is the cholesterol number that most doctors focus on, the LDL cholesterol, what's been called the bad cholesterol, that is not a marker of metabolic health. 2 other numbers on that panel are you have your HDL cholesterol level. This is the one that's oftentimes called good cholesterol because we do want it to be higher. So your goal, if you're a man, is for it to be over 40 milligrams per deciliter. As a woman, you want it to be over 50 milligrams per deciliter. And then we finally look at the triglycerides. And that one you want to be less than 150 milligrams per deciliter. So those are the 5 basic measures. If anyone, you don't have to write that down. You don't have to necessarily go rewind the tape here. Just go to my website, ifixhearts.com. Right on the front page, free quiz that you can take that will march you through those measures. The shocking statistic that I want people to hear, though, is 88% of the adults in the United States, so 9 out of 10 people essentially, do not meet those 5 measures of optimal metabolic health.
Wow.
Almost all of us are metabolically unhealthy and don't know it. Doctors don't talk about this enough. So start with those 5 basic measures of your metabolic health. And the other thing that I would throw in there, a very important and underutilized test, if you're concerned about heart disease, you want to know what's going on in the blood vessels of the heart. There's actually an easy, non invasive test that we can do. It's called a coronary artery calcium scan, CAC scan. It's a type of CAT scan. Many people are going to be familiar with CAT scans. Um, Very simple to do, takes 5 minutes. Most places you can get it done for around $100, and it shows us heart disease at its earliest stages. So
Wow.
that's another test that I highly recommend. Certainly, men by the time you're 40 years old, women by the time you're 50 years old, you should get your first CAC scan, and you can get it earlier if you have reasons to be concerned. If you know you're not good on those metabolic health measures, if you have a strong family history, if you're diabetic, obese, get the scan so you can figure out where you stand regarding heart disease.
This is incredibly valuable. Thank you. I'm sure the listener, I'm already thinking immediately, I'm like, I haven't got a CAC. I need to do that. I'm 50 at the time of this recording. Um, can people work with you? Can they, where can they learn from you? And I'm not saying work with you of like, I want to be on your operating table, but do you do consulting? Do you have courses? How can they find you, and how can they have a chance to learn from you in any which way?
Yeah, so I do run a telemedicine practice. We see patients all 50 states and even internationally. I have a great team. My nurse practitioner, I have health coaches, and you can go to ifixhearts.com, find out all about that. We also do have courses and resources. The book is a great place to start. Stay Off My Operating Table, widely available in all the usual places. And then iFixHearts is where to find me on all the social medias, and you can come follow me there as well.
That's incredible. Is there any question I did not ask that I should have asked you as we wrap up?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add to all of this, what I find is really most important for people's health journey is you need to understand why you're doing it. Like anything else in life, if you have that strong why, that's going to allow you to do the things that you need to do. I talk about, the concept of eat real food is very simple, but it's not easy. In our environment, it's very hard to stick to that. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that successfully is really understanding that why. Why do you want good health? What is it that's important to you in your life? Spending time with your children or your grandchildren, being alive and vital to be able to enjoy your grandchildren. Those are the things that really drive us to make these changes in life. As when you're trying to make major changes in your life, it's never easy. But if you have a good why, that's going to allow you to stick to the path and develop the habits that are going to ultimately lead to the success.
Sage advice. I appreciate that. Dr. Philip Ovadia, it's an absolute, it's an absolute pleasure. So thank you for being on the Built by Love podcast.
It's been great being with you, Daniel.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Built by Love podcast. If you found the conversation inspiring or helpful in any way, then head to builtbylove.com/podcast and make sure you're subscribed to our email list. Please also take a few minutes to leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts, and share this episode with a friend that you think it might help. Each review helps us to spread the message of love to more people. See you next time on the Built by Love podcast.